Ma'am, open the door fully. This address has been flagged. I need to conduct a search.
You don't have legal authority to enter my home. Unless you have a warrant, this conversation ends here.
If you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be making this difficult. Step aside.
I am not required to let you in without paperwork. You know
People who
that.
talk like that usually are hiding something.
Monica Ellis was home alone that evening, the quiet hum of the suburban street wrapping her house in a calm she rarely took for granted. She had spent the day in meetings, reviewing federal reports and handling sensitive cases, her mind heavy with responsibilities. The golden light of the setting sun filtered through her living room blinds, casting warm stripes across the polished floor. She was just pouring herself a cup of tea when the knock came. It was loud, urgent, demanding. Instinctively, she paused, her body tensing. The knock came again, harder this time, followed by a voice that carried authority and impatience. "Ma'am, step aside. I need to come in. We're running a narcotics investigation." Monica straightened, her pulse steady. She had faced aggressive situations before, but nothing like this in her own home. Her training, her knowledge of rights, and her years navigating federal law kicked in instantly. She walked to the door, peering through the peephole before opening it just enough to see the officer standing there. Officer Nathaniel Hayes, a man known in his precinct for aggressive tactics, arrogance, and a long trail of complaints, glared back. His uniform was pressed, badge gleaming, hands hovering near his belt. The confidence in his stance was palpable, the kind that demanded obedience. "You don't have a warrant, officer," Monica said firmly, her voice calm, but unyielding. "You're not coming in. Don't do this. If you're clean, it shouldn't be a problem," he said, his tone clipped and impatient. "Let me in." "I know my rights," Monica replied, locking eyes with him. "You can stand out here all day, but you cannot search without paperwork." He scowled, stepping closer. "Yeah, sounds like you're hiding something. Whatever it is." "I'm not hiding anything," Monica interrupted, her voice sharp now. "You are at the wrong address. Step back or show a warrant." The officer's jaw tightened. Monica could feel the tension radiating from him. His hand twitched near his belt, his other hand hovering over a set of keys dangling from his hip. For a moment, it looked like he might push past her. She stood firm, rooted in her training and authority, aware of every risk. Before the confrontation could escalate further, she paused and looked toward the camera she had set on the mantel earlier that week, a precaution she had taken after receiving threats at work. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it captured the entire porch. She was ready. "Good evening, officer," Monica said evenly. "You believe this is your street, your house, and your authority unchecked. You're wrong. Step aside." Hayes' face flushed, the heat of anger and disbelief rising. He had expected compliance, fear, an excuse, anything but a measured refusal from a black woman standing calmly in her own doorway. His past encounters had trained him to assume guilt, to rely on intimidation. Here, it was useless. "You think you can talk to me like that because you know your rights?" He spat. "You're lucky I'm not taking you in right now." Monica didn't flinch. "Go ahead," she said softly, almost a whisper, "and you'll see just how badly you miscalculated tonight." The officer froze. Her calmness cut through the tension like a blade. His mind flickered back to other incidents, other citizens, other complaints he had brushed aside. For the first time, he realized that his authority, his experience, and his badge were powerless against someone who knew the law and refused to back down. Neighbors began peering from behind curtains and blinds. The quiet street, usually indifferent to minor police visits, was becoming a witness. Monica could sense their attention, and it gave her confidence, a subtle reinforcement that Hayes' actions were no longer private. Every step, every word he spoke, every aggressive gesture was being watched. "You're making a mistake," she said again, louder now. Her tone carried authority, warning, and certainty. "You've come to the wrong house, Officer Hayes. Step back before you create consequences you cannot undo." His chest heaved. His fingers tightened on his belt. He took a step forward, ignoring the unseen cameras, ignoring the growing audience, believing that fear alone would force compliance. "Step aside now," he barked. "I can arrest you for obstruction if I have to." Monica's eyes didn't waver. "Arrest me," she said calmly, her voice deliberate. "Everything you're doing is being recorded. Every move, every threat. And when your report is reviewed, it will not match reality. You think your badge protects you? It won't." Hayes' face went red. Panic mingled with anger. He had built a career on assuming control, but here, nothing worked. The past complaints, the whispered warnings from supervisors, the reports he had ignored, they all flashed through his mind. Monica's presence, calm and immovable, had exposed him. For the first time, he felt trapped. The first twist came when a neighbor stepped onto their porch, phone in hand, discreetly filming. Hayes' glare shot toward them, but the damage was done. Monica didn't flinch. She had anticipated this. Her own phone, tucked in her pocket, was already streaming live to a secure feed. He had assumed she would be powerless, but she was prepared for exactly this scenario. "You really think you're in control?" Monica said softly, almost as a whisper. "Every action you take, every word, every threat is evidence. Every eye here is watching, and every single one will be held accountable if you continue." Hayes' voice cracked. I'm just doing my job." "Your job doesn't include harassment," Monica replied firmly. "It doesn't include intimidation, bias, or entering the wrong home without cause. Step back now." The tension on the street escalated, silent but palpable. Hayes' fingers twitched over his radio. Monica's presence, backed by technology and witnesses, held him in place. The authority he had relied on for years was collapsing, and the street had become a courtroom in real time. The final twist came when Monica reached into her pocket and held up a small official card, a verification of her federal authority. Hayes froze. Every attempt at control drained from him. His instincts screamed retreat, but pride and anger battled within. Every move now carried risk. Legal, professional, and personal. "You have a choice," she said, voice cutting through the thick tension. "Leave now and this ends quietly. Push further and every violation you've committed, every biased action, every complaint ignored, all of it comes to light. Do you understand me?" Hayes opened his mouth, but no words emerged. His arrogance, once a shield, now felt like a cage. A few tense seconds passed. The street seemed suspended in anticipation. Then he exhaled sharply, turned, and walked away. His boots echoed on the pavement like the final drumbeat of his authority collapsing. Monica closed the door, her breathing steady, her body tense but controlled. The street returned to its quiet rhythm, but the impact of the evening lingered. What began as a routine, biased police stop had become a public reckoning. Monica had turned intimidation into exposure, arrogance into accountability. The first complaints were filed within hours. The footage from neighbors and her own live feed spread online. Hayes' career, once unshakable, was already crumbling. Within weeks, the investigation revealed the pattern of bias and harassment he had built over years. Monica's calm defiance and preparedness had ensured consequences that would resonate far beyond her doorstep. Before I continue, I want to ask, where in the world are you watching from? And if you haven't yet, subscribe because the next chapter takes the story to an even more intense, behind-the-scenes courtroom and federal investigation that you won't believe. The day after the confrontation, Monica Ellis woke to a flurry of notifications on her phone. The footage from the porch had gone viral overnight. Every angle, every moment, every tense exchange was being shared across social media platforms, news outlets, and internal government channels. The story was simple yet shocking. A black DOJ official had stood her ground against a police officer's harassment and refused to be intimidated. Hayes' face, read with frustration and fear, was splashed across articles and videos. For Monica, the exposure was bittersweet. She had anticipated the consequences, but the speed at which the world had witnessed her encounter startled her. She dressed quickly, her mind already mapping out the next steps. She had called her legal team immediately after the confrontation, ensuring that the footage, the neighbor recordings, and her own live feed were preserved. Hayes' actions weren't just a violation of her rights. They were part of a larger pattern of abuse that had gone unpunished for too long. Monica knew the next phase wouldn't be easy. Federal investigations were thorough, meticulous, and slow-moving. Yet she had the advantage of irrefutable evidence. By mid-morning, the Department of Justice had contacted her. A formal internal review was being initiated. Monica sat at her desk as agents outlined the process. Interviews, background checks, witness statements, and a full audit of Hayes' past complaints and disciplinary records. She listened, her calm demeanor a mask over her growing satisfaction. For years, Hayes had skirted accountability. Now, the system was finally turning its focus on him. Meanwhile, Hayes reported to his precinct, unaware of the full scale of what had happened. He thought this would be a simple, minor complaint, easily smoothed over by a supervisor. Instead, he was greeted by an officer he had long respected, Lieutenant Charles Vaughn, who had called him into a small, stark office. The tension in the air was immediate. "Sit down, Hayes," Vaughn said, voice measured but firm. "We need to discuss last night." Hayes shifted uncomfortably, running a hand over his uniform as if adjusting it could shield him from the looming scrutiny. "Lieutenant, it's a routine stop. I was doing my job." She what?" Vaughn interrupted sharply. She stood her ground, as she had every right to do. "And you?" He paused, letting the weight of the word hang in the air, crossed the line. Hayes opened his mouth, then closed it. His mind raced. "Lieutenant, I've done nothing wrong." She wasn't cooperative. "Enough." Vaughn leaned forward, eyes locked on Hayes. "You have multiple complaints, Hayes. Multiple internal warnings. And now there's video evidence, citizen recordings, and a live feed confirming everything. This isn't minor. You're looking at suspension, possibly termination, and yes, legal consequences." The words hit like a hammer. Hayes' face drained of color. He had relied on fear, on control, on the assumption that complaints could be ignored. But the reality was unavoidable. The calm professionalism of Monica Ellis had exposed him, stripped him of his ego, and left him vulnerable. Back at Monica's home, the phone rang again. This time it was the neighbor who had filmed the first footage, a man named George Patterson. "Monica," George said, voice low but urgent, "I've been in touch with a few local news outlets. They're asking if you'll provide a statement. They want to highlight what happened. It could put additional pressure on the department." Monica considered it. Her first instinct was caution. She was a federal official, after all. Yet she understood the power of visibility. Public pressure could ensure that Hayes and others like him faced real consequences. "Do it," she said finally. "But be careful. Only facts, no speculation. The truth is enough." Hours later, Hayes was formally suspended. The paperwork was crisp, clinical, and damning. The statement read, "Pending investigation into allegations of misconduct, harassment, and abuse of authority." Hayes felt the ground shift beneath him. The precinct, his colleagues, his reputation, all the foundations he had built his career on, were crumbling. The federal review team assigned to Hayes' case began their work immediately. Monica met with investigators in a secure office, walking them through the confrontation in precise detail. She explained the officer's aggressive behavior, the repeated attempts to intimidate her, and the legal violations she had documented. Every word was corroborated by the multiple recordings, neighbor testimonies, and her own live feed. The most intense moment of the day came when Monica was asked to provide a reenactment of the confrontation for investigators. She recounted Hayes' escalating aggression, his threats, and the exact words exchanged at her doorstep. "He assumed compliance because of my race and my perceived vulnerability," she said. "He believed a badge could force obedience, but I refused to yield, and the evidence proves that his behavior was improper from the start." Investigators listened intently, taking notes. Monica's calm, unwavering demeanor left no room for doubt. Hayes' long pattern of misconduct could now be fully exposed. Later, as Hayes sat in a stark interrogation room, he finally confronted the weight of reality. 2 federal agents entered and placed a folder in front of him, thick with documentation. "Mr. Hayes," one agent said, voice flat, "this is an accumulation of all complaints, incidents, and violations on file against you, including your recent conduct at 324 Maplewood Drive. You understand the gravity of this?" Hayes swallowed hard. I was doing my job." "You were abusing your authority," the agent interrupted. "Multiple witnesses, multiple recordings, and official documentation contradict your claims. You are facing criminal charges for harassment, civil rights violations, and abuse of power." The words fell like lead. Hayes had always assumed that he could skirt consequences. Now, the evidence was undeniable. The system he had underestimated for years was catching up with him, and there was no escaping accountability. Meanwhile, Monica received calls from colleagues, legal advocates, and community leaders praising her bravery. Each conversation reminded her of the larger context: the fight against abuse of power, the struggle to hold law enforcement accountable, and the importance of knowledge and courage in standing one's ground. But it wasn't just public exposure that mattered. Hayes' own colleagues began to distance themselves. Rumors circulated about his behavior, previous complaints resurfaced, and the narrative of a career built on intimidation began to unravel. Within days, the department's Internal Affairs Division launched a full-scale investigation, interviewing former victims and analyzing past reports. Hayes' history of targeting black residents, disregarding protocol, and relying on bias became central to the case against him. Monica remained steadfast. She continued her work at the Department of Justice, balancing her daily responsibilities with the emerging legal proceedings against Hayes. Every meeting, every phone call, every press release reminded her of the stakes. Justice had to be served, not only for her but for every individual who had suffered under officers like Hayes. As the week drew to a close, Hayes' legal team began frantic preparations. The reality of federal scrutiny, multiple witness statements, and recorded evidence left them scrambling. Hayes, for the first time, realized that his career was over. The badge he had used as a weapon was now a symbol of everything he had lost. Monica, on the other hand, knew the confrontation at her door was only the beginning. The investigation would take months, possibly years, but she was prepared. Every step, every decision, every interaction had been documented. Hayes' downfall was not based on anger or revenge. It was rooted in law, accountability, and the refusal to be intimidated. And so, the stage was set. Hayes faced suspension, criminal charges, and public scrutiny. Monica Ellis had not only defended her rights, but had exposed a system that allowed abuse to fester unchecked. The battle between authority and accountability had begun, and the consequences for Hayes were inevitable. Before we continue, I want to ask, are you ready to see the courtroom showdown, the intense legal battles, and the ultimate consequences that Hayes would face for his actions? If you haven't already, subscribe because the final chapter delivers justice in full detail. You won't want to miss it. The courtroom was packed, a quiet tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Monica Ellis sat at the witness table, poised and professional, her testimony ready to be delivered. Across the room, Nathaniel Hayes' posture was rigid, the arrogance that had carried him for years now replaced by unease. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Videos from Monica's phone, multiple neighbors' recordings, official complaints, and internal reports documenting a consistent pattern of harassment and racial bias. This was no longer a matter of opinion or speculation. Hayes' career, his freedom, and his reputation were on the line. The prosecutor, Alicia Thompson, a sharp and methodical attorney with years of experience handling civil rights cases, approached the bench. "Ms. Ellis," she began, "can you recount the events of the evening in question, specifically addressing Mr. Hayes' conduct and your response?" Monica straightened in her seat. "Yes," she said clearly. "He approached my home, asserting authority without cause, demanding entry. I informed him that he did not have a warrant and could not enter without legal documentation. Despite my calm demeanor and repeated explanations, he persisted, attempting to intimidate me and assert control." Thompson nodded. "And how did you respond to his attempts at intimidation?" "I stood my ground," Monica replied, her voice steady. "I informed him of my rights, and I remained firm without escalating the situation. I also had multiple devices recording the interaction. The officer's behavior was aggressive, unwarranted, and rooted in assumptions based on my race and position." The courtroom was silent as Monica described the confrontation. Every detail she provided was corroborated by the recordings, each played on the large screen behind the prosecutor. Hayes' shouts, his threats, and his aggressive movements were undeniable. The jury watched in real time as the officer, once confident and imposing, was revealed to be panicked, red-faced, and out of control. During cross-examination, Hayes' attorney tried to downplay the incident. "Isn't it true, Ms. Ellis, that Officer Hayes was performing his duties and that you refused to cooperate?" Monica's eyes met the attorney's with unwavering focus. "I cooperated within the law," she replied. "I did not obstruct his duties. I demanded that he follow proper legal procedure. That is not non-cooperation, it is the exercise of my rights. He violated my rights by attempting to intimidate and force entry without legal authority." The defense attempted to frame her actions as confrontational, suggesting she had provoked Hayes. Monica's response was simple, clear, and firm. "I did not provoke anything. I maintained composure. The provocation came from the officer's repeated illegal attempts to enter my home and assert control over me based on bias and assumption." The prosecution then introduced records of Hayes' prior complaints. Multiple victims, all black residents, had reported harassment, intimidation, and violations of procedure. Monica's case was not an isolated incident. It was the tipping point in a documented history of abuse. The judge reviewed each file, his expression tightening as the evidence accumulated. During a recess, Hayes sat in a corner, visibly shaken. The realization that his career could be permanently destroyed weighed on him. He had built a reputation on fear, authority, and the assumption of compliance. Every tactic he had relied upon had failed against Monica Ellis. His colleagues no longer whispered defenses. They avoided eye contact, aware that the evidence left no room for support. Back on the stand, Monica faced one final challenge, a hypothetical scenario posed by Hayes' attorney. If an officer believes a situation is suspicious, isn't it reasonable to act decisively? Monica's reply was measured, precise. Reasonable action requires adherence to the law. Acting on assumptions, bias, or racial profiling is not reasonable. An officer cannot justify illegal actions by claiming suspicion. Legal authority comes with accountability, and he failed to act within the bounds of that authority. The jury deliberated for 2 full days. In those hours, the weight of the evidence, the clarity of Monica's testimony, and the damning video footage guided their decision. When they returned, the courtroom was tense with anticipation. The judge called the room to order. On the charge of civil rights violations, harassment, and abuse of authority, he announced, "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." Hayes' face paled. The years of arrogance, the assumptions of immunity, and the reliance on fear had all collapsed in an instant. Monica allowed herself a small, controlled breath of relief. Justice had been served, not only for her, but for the countless others who had endured similar harassment. The sentencing phase followed. Prosecutors presented evidence of Hayes' repeated misconduct, his disregard for citizen rights, and the pattern of racial bias. Monica attended the hearing, knowing that the sentence would send a clear message. Abuse of power would not be tolerated. After careful consideration, the judge announced the sentence: 8 years in federal prison, immediate suspension from all law enforcement duties, and permanent disqualification from holding public office in any law enforcement capacity. Hayes sat motionless, the weight of the verdict sinking in. The badge he had once wielded as a weapon was now meaningless. Outside the courthouse, Monica was met by news crews and supporters. Reporters asked for her reaction. She spoke calmly, her words precise, focused on justice and accountability rather than personal victory. "This case demonstrates that no one is above the law," she said. "Authority must always be exercised with respect for rights and fairness. When individuals abuse power, they must face consequences." The story resonated nationwide. Advocacy groups hailed the verdict as a turning point, a reminder that knowledge, courage, and preparation could hold even powerful figures accountable. Hayes' conviction became a reference point in training programs for law enforcement, emphasizing proper procedure, bias awareness, and the importance of accountability. Monica returned to her work at the Department of Justice, the shadow of the incident lingering but tempered by accomplishment. She continued to handle sensitive cases, each day reinforcing the lessons learned from that fateful evening. Her calm courage had not only defended her rights, but had sparked a broader conversation about policing, racial bias, and accountability. Meanwhile, Hayes began serving his sentence. His former colleagues avoided him, and his reputation as a respected officer was permanently destroyed. The video evidence, the testimony, and the public exposure had ensured that there would be no quiet retreat from his actions. 8 years in federal custody became a daily reminder of the consequences of arrogance, prejudice, and abuse of authority. The quiet suburban street where it all began eventually returned to normal. Neighbors spoke of the incident in hushed, reverent tones. Monica's bravery was remembered not as confrontation, but as justice enacted. The house at 324 Maplewood Drive became symbolic, a place where one person's knowledge, courage, and unwavering stance changed the course of accountability. In the end, the story was simple yet profound. Authority must be guided by law, respect, and ethics. Arrogance and bias, when left unchecked, eventually collide with reality. Monica Ellis' calm defiance and preparation ensured that justice was not just served for herself, but set a precedent for all who might face similar intimidation. Hayes' 8-year sentence became a testament to the principle that power without accountability is meaningless. Monica, standing on her porch months later, reflected on the journey. The cameras were gone, the street quiet once more, but the lesson remained. Courage, knowledge, and steadfastness had triumphed over intimidation. And for every witness, every neighbor, every person who had doubted the possibility of accountability, the story remained. Injustice can be confronted, arrogance can be exposed,